talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about like how you first started working with Alan. I mean, obviously, you are one of the heroes of my book. You and Marty Malloy spearheaded probably one of the biggest, most important parts of the transformation that Alan undertook at Ford, which was completely changing the dynamic with United Auto Workers, doing something that had previously been believed to be impossible, reopening a contract with them. And you know, tell us a little bit about that and also that in the context of working together, because I know that the relations with labor was a big part of this working together philosophy.
There's no question. I think it's a significant component of how Ford was able to, go its own way. And as you again called out nicely in the book, American Icon. When you think about it, Alan got there in the fall of '06. We had been through a North American restructuring plan already underway. A lot of plant closings, a lot of negativity, a lot of a need to really invest in the product, but also to reduce the manufacturing capacity because our volumes had declined, and we were losing money. Alan came in, of course, and was the face of Ford to raise the $23 billion, which then helped give us the path to be able to do the things we wanted to do, which is a lot of money, of course, as we borrowed that much money to make that happen. But, one of the things that Alan did well was he asked a lot of questions, and he did it. He tried to do it in a very non-confrontational way. And he would always, so he'd pull me aside all the time because he wanted to understand the labor component of it, because I had a lot of experience in it. And as you mentioned, Marty, who's still a good friend of mine, was a great partner. And he would ask me questions like, so tell me why we can't reduce people, or because we had the jobs bank and we had the gen obligations, guaranteed employment numbers. So we basically had a situation set up where even if volumes declined or other things happened, you were paying people full time not to work.
Let me just jump in here if I can, Joe. This was actually the very first major story I wrote when I started covering Ford for the Detroit News in 2005. Was, I don't remember the number. It was like 1,100 people paid not to work or something like this. And in reporting this story, my head, my mind was well and truly boggled, because I didn't, I grew up in California, didn't know how things worked in the industrial parts of the country. And folks, people at this time that Joe's talking about, and I went and sat with a lot of them, they were getting paid on average $70,000-$80,000 a year to show up at a Ford factory and spend all day in a break room watching war documentaries on the History Channel, doing crossword puzzles, and getting paid, like I said, $70,000-$80,000. Some of them for years had been doing this. And under the current contract that had been negotiated in better times, there was nothing Ford could do about that. And as you say, Alan he was like, explain to me again how this works.
I felt like, and Alan was the kind of guy that would ask you a question, he'd answer it, and then if he didn't like the answer, he'd kind of ask it nicely again. And then he wouldn't say like, you're wrong, or that doesn't make any sense. He just would look at you, and then about a day later, he'd ask you the same question again, and then he would ask you the same question again. So he kept asking me the same question because I don't think he wanted to ever grasp the answer, because So, but that kind of gets us to our approach. My approach, frankly, even before Alan got there, was to have an honest dialogue with the UAW leadership and our employees about this. Not just the guaranteed employment piece, but just the competitiveness of our company and where we really were, and have an honest dialogue on it, which hadn't really happened, because Ford and the UAW had a great relationship amongst the big three traditionally, but it was more about, we don't talk about tough things, we don't fight about things, it was let's all get along. And our company was at risk of not even surviving. So we had a big meeting in Vegas. You cover it in the book, where I, for the first time, kind of show them, all the union leaders, kind of our competitive challenges, where we rank on safety, quality, efficiency, what it means, how much it's costing us, all these things by plant. And we requested each of the plants to open up the contract locally to do competitive operating agreements, to get more competitive locally, to be able to contribute to our success. And I give a lot of credit to the UAW leadership at the time. Bob King was the vice president of the Ford department. They had the courage to say, we think there's a risk here. We're going to try and do this. So we actually, in 2006, went plant by plant. I think with the exception of 2 plants, we did new competitive operating agreements that were significantly improved the efficiency and reduced some of the friction stuff that we had in the business. But it didn't get to the core of some of the challenges. And then you fast forward 2007, we did the UAW negotiations, and that's when the VEBA, the Voluntary Employee Beneficiary Association, put the retiree healthcare obligations, which were a significant burden to the balance sheets of the auto companies, to the UAW trust.
And this was huge. I remember at the time, I know that we calculated our paper that on every car built in the United States, for a Ford built versus the same class of car built by Toyota in the United States, $2,400, I think, added cost to the Ford just to service these retiree healthcare costs and stuff. And if you think about that, folks, when you're talking about millions of vehicles being built, $2,400 per vehicle that Toyota could plow into R&D, could plow into making more efficient factories, could plow into marketing. And is it any wonder then that you see this kind of relentless increase in the market share of particularly the Japanese automakers in this decline of the American automakers? And that's why it was so important to tackle this, right?
It was, and so it was foundational. I mean, I don't remember the exact number, but it was certainly a lot bigger than the actual labor content of the vehicle, which is fascinating, right? So,
right, it's mind-boggling.
It's part of the history because there were so many retirees compared to active workers because of the downsizing that occurred. You got to remember that in the '60s, GM and Ford had combined well over 50% market share in the U.S., and then by the time we're talking about here, it's in the 30s. So, just a massive plus. A lot of stuff was done in-house, vertically integrated before and changed.
Also pre-automation too.
Correct. A lot of reasons. Yeah. So, and then in 2007, we did the agreement and we introduced some new concepts, and it was fascinating because it was it was believed to be a monumental agreement, and it was in many ways.
Yeah.
However, that's before the financial crisis hits.
Right.
Then the global financial crisis hits, and oh my gosh, now we're really in trouble.